Good morning and welcome to this week's Uplifting Conversation. And with me this week, I have the beautiful Jessie Nichols George with me, who is going to give us the heads up on what to expect for the month ahead. You can join us on the show. We would love you to interact. If you've got some comments, we can read your comments and respond. If you've got questions, we love this being a conversation, not just us delivering something to you. We want to deliver something with you. So welcome to all the guests who are listening on the live, or anybody who is watching the replay on our podcasts or Mint Radio or wherever you find our show. So, and I will also just say, Anne, I'm so pleased you're here. I know you haven't been well and you've made the effort to come on. We weren't quite sure how you would go. So we wish you all the best and look forward to what offerings you have for us this week. And good morning to our faithful Jean, who is always good at joining in, and anybody else who comments. So, Anne, what's happening in your world and what's happening in our world, and what kind of things, where do we start with this very intense energy that is happening at the moment? And I'm assuming will be ongoing.
This is true. I've heard a lot of people say, man, have they been hit in March? And I know my personal codes got hit pretty hard, as you know, enough to knock me flat on my back for 4 days. And I'm happy to say I'm coming back piece by piece from all of that. And these are part of the times we're in, but this is part of the code journey work. For people that are wondering what the code journey is, this is what it looks like. It's a book that I release every year, and it's full of insights. It's full of wisdom, really, to help people on their own personal journey and to open those doors to how to deal with these different currents that are coming through and coming up for us. And a lot of people have said, man, has March been nasty? And I think a lot of people are looking for, some sort of sense of comfort or ease or reassurance that it's going to be easier going forward. I have to say that April is going to be a tough month too. And while I always want to be that person that comes in and, is the bearer of good news and everything's going to be wonderful, unfortunately, that's not always the case of what we have going on. But there are always shifts, even though there's very similar currents between what we've been dealing with in March and what's going down in April. We have components that are always just a little bit different in our focus, a little bit different in what becomes important or what rises to the surface. So we never have 2 months that are exactly the same, even though we have some overlap on them. Now, coming up in April, Kay, one of the things that I think is really hard for people right now is that the mind is not very clear. So the mind's not necessarily in this logical space. It's not necessarily looking at things from that practical mindset. And that is one of the things that we oftentimes think, oh, well, isn't that a good thing, right? My intuition's writing, my creativity's going, all this type of energy is flowing. So, isn't that a good thing? Well, in some ways it's a good thing because it does connect us with spirit. It does connect us with the soul self and our dreams and our visions and all of those things that we love looking at. And yet at the same time, we have to be very careful of that because we can become very flighty. Our mind can drift off mid-sentence. We might not complete things that can affect our communications. So it can cascade in a lot of different directions. And that brings me to really one of the top key words for April that we want to think about is grounding. And grounding is always an interesting thing because so many people think, I thought we weren't supposed to ground into earthly stuff. I thought we, shouldn't be doing too much of that. But really, what we do in these situations, or what we want to do, is to ground into spirit. We want to ground into divine presence. And if we can do that, then we can balance or offset some of that um, light. I don't know if I'd say lightheadedness, but I guess that is one of the ways it can manifest. Um, that aspect of not being totally present, which is one of the things that happens when we get into these really creative, innovative, brainstorming kind of spaces. So finding that ability to uh, balance the intuition, which is wonderful. We need that. We want to brainstorm with not being so flighty that we can't communicate.
Mm, I like that. Now, you prompted me to get out my grounding oil to keep me grounded. And I always like to have this idea that we're grounded, we're on the ground, we're in our body, but we've also got that connection to spirit. So, two oils that I would be talking about for those purposes would be grounding, and frankincense comes to mind as well, because that will help to get all those beautiful messages from source, from God, that help us to raise our vibrations and be in the know of, even if we are having these rough moments, or you were talking before about wanting to have positive language all the time and bringing that to people. Well, we know that life can be tumultuous at times, but these conversations are what is supportive for people to keep a handle on the energy. And that's thing of, what is it, pre-warned is pre-armed. If you've got the heads up, you kind of know that you've definitely got to have your seatbelt on and be ready for what is happening. Somebody said to me years ago, life is a roller coaster. Get your seatbelt on, it's going to get pretty rocky. So that's the positive side of things, when we know that we can actually take some action to be in more control of, or more steering the ship, having more direction, more ability to be the one who guides our way through. We've got a comment here, and good morning to Tiffy as well, and Gian. She says good morning. She's keen to hear more about personal codes and get some kind of big picture view, which is perfect for being here. I often feel as though I don't know how to communicate, and that I'm somehow like a voice in the wilderness.
Well, and it is interesting because, Kay, we have these general influences that are going on around the world that everybody's kind of dealing with, and then we have our personal codes going on, and that can always aspect things, and our life codes are going on. So the things we deal with throughout our entire life, where Gian is mentioning that feeling as though I don't know how to communicate, and that I am sometimes like a voice in the wilderness. Well, we all have these different aspects. Some of us are not meant to be heavily logical people. Some of us really are just meant to be more of a channel, in a way, to bring forward messages, to bring forward different communications. But when we get these unclear mind energies flowing, the communications become challenging, because what happens is it's easier for misunderstandings to happen. It is where we might just drift off mid-sentence when this influence is present. And Gian, the codes really are about the energetic vibrations that are present. So it's sharing with us the currents, the influences that are around us, that we then have the ability to take advantage of working with those, and also to have that heads up to know what we need to be paying attention to along the way. For a lot of people, another thing that's going to come up, Kay, is this sense of needing a lot more sense of freedom, of adventure, um, having having the ability to start to tune into our real power in things. And so the freedom and the adventure is always interesting, especially when we have an aspect of unclear mind. Now, one of the things that I actually like to do during that time, and yes, you have to pay attention, you have to plan a little bit in advance if you're going to do this, but I like to do what's called serendipity days, which is just I'll fill the tank up, I'll get in the car, and I just go. And when I hit a crossroad or an intersection, I just, in that moment, I let my intuition guide me and say right or left, and then I take that direction and I go to the next point, and then decide when I get to the next point. And I let it just be very, very free flowing. So it gives me this ability to be adventurous, to go and not know what I'm going to run into. And sometimes I will pick like a theme. And then whenever I hit something that connects to that theme, that's where I'll turn or that's where I'll shift. And so these things can be really fun, but again, we need to pay attention. We don't want our mind to get drifting too far away when we're driving places, right? On there. And this can open us up to a lot of new experiences. So we might find, maybe a new restaurant that we end up at, or a park that we hadn't been to before, or a road that we hadn't traveled before. And what's great with this, especially under these conditions, is that it opens up our senses. Our senses become more alive because we are in places that are not familiar to us. So we can't go on autopilot as easily. And that is also another way that kind of helps to ground some of that energy out and to kind of brings us into the present moment so that we don't get too far drifted out there. And through these experiences, these open up these experiences that then can really allow us to start to experience humbleness. And humbleness is a key theme. That's what I did my video on this month for people every year. Every month I put out a new video on a topic, and then people can go in and check it out and see what the codes are connected to that. But that humbleness aspect is really, I find that to be very exciting in a lot of ways. It brings together kind of the past, present, and future. And it brings us to a point of, again, this openness, this receptiveness, not becoming too full of ourselves, and kind of bringing in this practical reality piece in there.
I like that. And of course, my mind goes to oils. Now, the first one that we were talking about a bit earlier on is around communication. And I've recently researched this one, which is called Australian Blue, and it has some of our eucalyptus in and a collection of Australian oils. And it's very good for communicating with relationships and being able to express ourselves, and connection, making a connection with the communication is so important. So that one comes to mind. And then present time, of course, comes to mind to keep us in the now, in the here and the moment, to keep us, not stressing about the future too much, because I think a lot of us, I know that's something that I have going on for me. And I suppose particularly because I have 4 children and 7 grandchildren, and you kind of go, oh my gosh, the world's doing this crazy topsy-turn process that we're going through at the moment. And I know that there's this beautiful light at the end of the tunnel, or somewhere in the tunnel, but and I know it's in the tunnel now in the moment, but if I let my mind go too far forward, I get really concerned about my children, my grandchildren, and all those things. And then you kind of, nothing works. Your mind can take you into a topsy-turvy tumble. So it's so important to be in the moment. And like in my world right now, everything is okay. So I don't have to worry about the future. Plan and prepare, or be aware. But, when we get caught up in the worry of it, it's counterproductive, or even in the past, because the past is done and dusted. So we've got to learn how to navigate whatever's the past has done to us.
Well, and this is true, this this knowing where to be, and that actually plays into influences from the 1st through the 20th of the month of April. And it calls us to be really careful with our choices. We want to make sure that the things that we are choosing during that time period are going to help us to bring forth more freedom, to bring forth greater self-sufficiency. So building that confidence within ourselves, that's something that we were having a lot of in March, where people were needing to build up their confidence. So sometimes we get that shaking up in order to strengthen ourselves going on in there. And it calls us to look at what can we do to simplify things during that period of time. So that becomes important, because a lot of times people can confuse centralizing with simplifying. And they're two very different things. And we want to learn how to simplify without centralizing. And so paying attention to that. And we do have this opportunity where there can be some value going into the past, doing some of that reflective work and drawing on ancient wisdom. And I think this is one of the keys. So much in society, we try to jump into modern or current day solutions for things, and it really loses some of the wisdom that our body really needs. When we tap into things like the essential oils and things like that, our body resonates naturally with the wisdom that that has to offer. So keeping those things in mind, as you say, there's a balance that has to be found in that, because we want to be able to work with the foresight. We want to take into consideration, okay, if I'm choosing this path, where might that lead me? We want to consider, is this going to close off my freedom or give me more freedom? Is this going to strengthen my skills, or is this going to weaken me and put me at the mercy of other people? And so one of the keys to helping us to not go too far out into the future, or to get into that worry space, which is, as you mentioned, easy to do. I've dealt with some of that this past month. It's been it's hit me hard as well in my personal codes. But we can look at, if I ease up what I need to do, maybe I let go of a couple of responsibilities, or maybe I look at what will create a greater flow in my day, for example. Those are ways that we simplify things. Maybe I set some things out the night before so that they're all ready to go the next day, and then I don't have to worry about thinking too much about some of those things, especially if my mind is not in a clear space at that time. And so that would be the simplification. When we centralize, what we do is we take multiple things and we put them into one area. It would be like, if you used one social media platform to access all 10 of your social media platforms. Now you're dealing with centralization. And some people think, well, doesn't that make it easier? Well, here again, you've got to balance that, because when you put it all in one place, then something going wrong at that one point takes down everything. So finding that balance, I think, is very important. When we centralize, we tend to lose our power. So in some ways we think, well, it's more convenient, but it's not always about what's more convenient. What's more convenient is not always what is really the simplest path either. So I know these things can get a little bit confusing, but again, if we bring it down, and a lot of times in our choices, when we're trying to make choices about things, we're trying to make decisions about things, especially if our mind is not clear, we try to account for so many different things. So if we can simplify it down to a couple of core concepts like freedom, and self-sufficiency. And then let those be your markers. It's going to become a lot easier to make those decisions that you need to make.
Absolutely. We might be getting a little bit of glitchy. When we first hopped on this morning, there was a little bit of freezing. I was a bit concerned that was about to happen, but it hasn't. But I would also like to welcome Helen McKenzie from WA. She says, "G'day, Kay and Anne. How wonderful to receive the conversation this morning." So thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to have you here, Helen. And we hope you get some good gold nuggets, because Anne is always bringing us lots of really good food for thought, and some gives us the heads up on what we can do to help us navigate our way forward. So my mind, when you just said, imagine all social media platforms being on one, I kind of went, oh my gosh, even look, Facebook there's so many things you can navigate, there's groups and this and that. And I got to a point a while ago where I thought, I think it's time I called my shots, and I started following myself and not following so many other people, and then becoming more selective with how much time. Oh, that blacked out again. Being more selective about where you spend your time with, and who you listen to, so that I've got more time to free up and do other things.
Well, definitely. And, I think these are part of the balances that we have to find. You hit a certain point where you have to say, I can't keep up with everybody else's stuff. I've got to focus on my own. Who's going to listen to it will be the people that listen to it. And as you say, that kind of prioritizing component there. And I see that, Jean was talking about during her days, she can be back and forth with past and future. And it's hard, after being present, to jump around in these different spots. Gian is mentioning that she needs to build inner resilience and self-belief, and saying that some of the lack of clarity is due to now knowing what they will be doing with things such as social media platforms, invasion of privacy, all that other stuff in there. So we're in times that are naturally uncertain. We're not going to have all the answers. Everything's not going to be laid out as clear and as easy as it has been in the past. There's no question about that, I would say. But one of the things that comes up as we move towards the end of the month is a need to face our challenges. These are not the times that we can just skirt around everything, ignore it, and say, well, if I just don't pay attention to it, it's going to go away. This is a time where we're going to have to go through things. So April is really a big time for that. And part of facing our challenges, part of moving through things, is making sure that we are handling our responsibilities and obligations, making sure that we're not procrastinating on things. And I get it. When we have all these things coming down on us in the world, it's very easy to say, oh, I just don't feel like it. I just don't want to do this today. I don't want to deal with it. But when we do that under the currents that we have towards the end of April, what happens is we actually set ourselves up for things to be harder. So if we will just take hold and say, okay, let me just do this and do it in the moment while it's there, handle it right away, what we actually then do is open up time for ourselves. We open up opportunities to have more things to enjoy, and we create a flow that will open up. But when we procrastinate, we go into that resistance, we dig in our heels, we fuss about everything, then we create more blocks and challenges. It becomes harder to do it once we start to get to it. And I think that's a core thing. One of the things that we really also have to watch towards the end of the month is that we don't go into these spaces of fear. So we want to consider what practical options can we take in our lives to reduce or to minimize the things that trigger fear for us. And I think this is a big thing. I mean, we all face it. I mean, I face it. I know a lot of other people that face it. And it's like, man, how am I going to see my way through this? Or, okay, I've got enough to last to this point, and then what do I do? And so if we start to, again, use maybe some of that creative brainstorming mindset that we have available to us, we can start to tap in and we can put together like a plan A, B, C, and D. And this is no different than having an emergency preparedness plan in place. When we do this, we provide a certain amount of security. We don't always know how something's going to play out, but we can remove the fear because our mind automatically goes to a place that says, I don't have to worry about this because I do have plans A, B, and C ready to go. And so I think this is a big thing, and I encourage people to do that. Again, we've got the creativity, we've got the brainstorming, and the time to put those plans together are when you don't need them. It's not about creating a doom scenario. It's not about creating those worst case things to happen, but it's no different than saying, do I have batteries on hand if the power goes down? Do I have a backup for this? Do I have extra blankets? Do I have enough food to last me 3 days or a week or things like that? It's no different than that. And we don't have to live in that fear of, oh my gosh, I'm going to create this. But it's more like, okay, I've got this in place. So actually now I don't have to worry about it at all.
Yep. Having your toolkit ready or having things on hand is a good idea. Part of how I've dealt with, the journey, the intense journey of the last few years is to become part of the solution, or to not get caught up in where we are, but to, start laying out plans and this is part of, what's stimulated me to have these conversations with people, to give people an option and a way forward of empowerment, because when each and every one of us take responsibility for, moving forward, or take responsibility to become part of the solution, you start creating community, you start listening to other people, or I just find that it's something that as a collective, more and more of us ideally need to step into our personal power and to become educated, or to get the resources, or to make a difference in the world. And that gives you that feeling that you're actually doing something of value, which is, very rewarding, even if you're not out there, slaying the dragon straight away or something immediately. To me, it makes me feel as if I am working towards a better way forward, and that is very comforting.
Well, and that is one of the great assets too, if we will stay handling the things that we need to handle, then as you say, that puts us in a more proactive space. It puts us in that action space to not go down some of the more challenging or harsher paths along the way. We do have a lot of transformation energy coming up at the end of April. That last week and a half in there, it's a time where things will naturally want to be closing out. It's a time that, it connects to what we say is death energy, but it is death, of course, is oftentimes major transformation. And it calls us to really consider what we need to let go of, being actively involved in things that are closing out in our life, and closing them out from the heart and through love. And that is incredibly important. It's an opportunity to particularly release addictions during that time. And that is, if we can do that, if we can bring an end to things that we are addicted to, if we can close out those habitual patterns that are not working to our benefit, we will actually start to reclaim more of our power. So, for example, a lot of people, they get stressed and then they will naturally reach for food. They'll naturally reach for something that's unhealthy, sugars, chocolate, whatever it is in there, or a glass of wine or whatever it is. But if we're willing to stand strong and not go to that sort of crutch, what we will actually do is we'll find our power coming back into us more,
Mm,
and we will actually open up channels for success. We will open up the channels of victory, and we will actually be able to strengthen and build that resilience. Somebody mentioned resilience in the chat earlier, that we can do, and it will keep us on a more action based path, which we need to do, because we will naturally go to that. A lot of people will naturally lean towards their addictions at the end of the month because they are feeling like they want to break down. They're feeling overwhelmed by it. So I'm sure you've got an oil that helps people to to center back in and to get the strength that they need to stay focused on the breakthrough.
mm. Well, if there's a lot of transformation at the end of the month, well, we have an oil called transformation, which is, the oil that is going to help you move through those times and help you move through the procrastination. So it has a lot of, no, I might have to look in my little book here just to see all the oils in here. I have to peel the stickiness on the label. Is well and truly stuck because I've had this one for quite some time. So it's got lemon. So if you don't have transformation, you could make your own blend using some of these: lemon, peppermint, Royal Hawaiian sandalwood, clary sage, frankincense, Idaho blue spruce, cardamom, ocotea, and Palo Santo. So it they say it strengthens that, um, inspires your mind and spirit and strengthens your courage and your ability to get ready to move on. So it's going to help you move on from that procrastination and help you to convert all those negative beliefs and into, more positive outlook. So fantastic. It's a beautiful oil. I love it. It's one of those, there's so many oils I love. So you can never really say to me, what's your favorite? I might say, well, today this is my favorite. But also that thing you were talking about, moving on from old, from what do they call them? From bad choices or, addictions. That's right. Before Christmas, I had, slumped into a state where I was loving chocolate, and give me a block of chocolate and I could scoff the whole thing down. And I was bit concerned about, this is not really what I'm on about, and I'm always promoting good health and well-being, but the human in me had got the better of me. But one day I just said, right, I'm saying no to chocolate, and I just found it so empowering, and I stopped eating chocolate. Now I'll have just a little bit, but I've just started weaving my way back into, having a little bit more occasionally. But it was so good to tell myself, no, I'm saying no to chocolate, and standing in my strength around that. And it was actually quite easy. It was like, no, I'm not having chocolate. It was something that once I had that conviction and I'd stated it, it was fantastic. So Gian says she's lost connection with the live at 10:30. Oh, she's in Queensland. Anyway, we will keep going because it will be in the replay. I'm sure it will. So where are we up to? So Mars, sorry, we're in April, which is,
Yeah.
it's notorious for a lot of conflict in the world, isn't it? The being in the sign of Aries.
Well, I think definitely there is that piece in there, and we do have some battle energy that comes in. I mean, as far as what we're going to see action wise in the world during April, um, but it's kind of a two-edged way in there, because what we have is we can actually make a lot of progression where we're willing to put our energy in, if we're in divine alignment, if we're aligning with that. And that's another thing when we talk about the addictions that can be in there. I no longer look at things based on, oh, I'm deprived and I'm trying to not have a certain thing. It's more of, I am choosing to commit to a certain lifestyle that I know is going to help me out. And so that temptation is then becomes something that just pulls me away, which I don't want. And so I will consciously make that choice. Now, in making that choice, one of the things that happens is I come more and more into divine alignment. When I become more in divine alignment, what we're going to see is those people who are there, the spiritual warriors, so to say, they're going to have rapid progression going on. So the more that they are doing to open divine presence in our world, the faster they're going to be moving. That is going to create some backlash. And that backlash can bring military into the spotlight. It can bring retaliation from those who are not standing in divine alignment, who are working against it, who are trying to shut it down in our world. And so that is where we'll probably see some of that battle energy come up, that a lot of people associate with the Aries influences, not having that patience in there. So I think when we get into that, we don't want to fear it too much because it can bring attacks. But what we want to do is, again, strengthen our resilience, strengthen our connection to God, to divine presence, to the soul self, and anchor into that, anchor in and ground into that. And when we do, that naturally creates a shield. It naturally creates an aspect of protection for us when we do that. So we shouldn't be afraid if something does take a sudden leap forward. We don't want to be afraid of that. We want to jump in and ride it like, you're riding the rapids down a river or something like that. You want to embrace it and go with it in there, because we don't want to put those brakes on, because we want to keep opening that energy up. And we want to be very careful at this time. What we'll probably see is we want to stay a little bit more in observation in some ways. Don't be so ready to jump on to do something or to make something happen, because in that process, what we're going to see is we may see people at battle with each other, having arguments with each other, and we don't want to be pulled into their battles. We need to know what is ours to deal with and what is somebody else's to deal with during this time. So there's a little bit of an ebb and a flow in there that we want to honor and respect. And we want to see, is it possible to reconcile our differences? If we can possibly do that, maybe we find some common ground. We're not necessarily going to agree on everything, but we do want to do what we can to reconcile the differences that are creating blocks for us or inhibiting that progression which is available to us.
I love solving issues. I actually have to have a lot of respect for my sister, because a couple of years ago we all had to make a certain choice. Most of us were laid heavily upon to make a certain choice in the world, and it was a worldwide choice. Nearly all of us had to come to a decision around it. And I used to try and talk to my family and give them insight and things, and my sister's going, oh, but I've listened to scientists, and I'm going, but so have I. And we actually just came to a point where we just said, well, I think we're going to we'll have to come to a point where we agree to disagree. And in other words, you've got your belief and I've got my belief, and let's just leave it at that, because I didn't want to lose a sister in my choices, and she didn't want to lose me through her choices. So it was something that dear to my heart, and something I was concerned about and still am concerned about. But we still can come to terms with. Let's just agree to disagree. And it's a very freeing thing when you can actually do that, because to me, losing relationships over some choices, it's not worth it. And look, I just know so many people who can't, thinking of one lady who in mind who has lost access to her grandchildren because of choices she's made. And it was nothing that would directly affect the children in reality, but people, this taking sides is, not always a healthy way to survive, because to me, relationships are over and above all of those other, different people's opinions or beliefs.
Well, and we want to keep in mind that just because two people are battling each other today doesn't mean they're going to battle each other tomorrow. And once you take sides, you now have everybody turning against you.
Yes,
For no
exactly.
reason. And
Yeah.
so if we can just hold that objectivity, if we can just hold a more open perspective, and if you find yourself getting caught in somebody else's battles, they're trying to drag you into things, one of my keys is to turn the tables around and start asking questions. Start asking people questions. Well,
Yes.
if this is going on, how is that impacting you? Or what is the real feelings you're having? Or what is the real trigger behind this? Or I've noticed that every time this person does this, it seems to set you off. So, what is it about that particular thing? Maybe you can come to your own conclusion on that. And for a lot of people, they will come to their own conclusions. They will come to their own understanding. Sometimes they just need to talk it out. And they're really not looking for us to give them any real serious advice in things.
Mm.
One of the key things that we want to keep in mind as far as just our mental state of being during the month of April is to hold pleasant thoughts. And this isn't about ignoring what's happening or discarding the reality of what's happening. But we need to hold those pleasant thoughts to heal the aspects of hopelessness. Because as we mentioned earlier, it can be easy when you feel bombarded by things, when you're feeling overwhelmed by things, it can be very easy to go into that sense of feeling hopeless. And so we want to be careful of where we're holding our thoughts. We want to make sure, okay, is this really as bad as I'm making it out to be? Is there really no solution, or does it just feel like that right now? And part of this comes around because there's likely to be um, things coming up that are designed to be kind of like mind games from like the 4th through the 12th and that kind of a time frame. Um, so a lot of trauma, a lot of drama stuff getting stirred up, a lot of chaos being stirred up to confuse the mind, which we already know we have, not the most clarity going on to start with. So again, coming back into that positive mindset can actually shift that sense of being traumatized and allow us to actually embrace and to handle the things that are happening. It's going to be really important during that time frame as well, again, to simplify where we can. Let's not make things ever so complicated. Let's prioritize. Let's look at what the main key things are that we need to focus on. And we're going to need to make sure we're taking some mental breaks, because the intensity of what's coming in April, we have to give ourselves some of those breaks. We have to take a moment to go step outside and breathe the air for a moment and just refresh ourselves a little bit.
So the cue for April is to make sure that your diary isn't, really filled back to back, so that you do give yourself that opportunity to have some downtime. I know for me, when I get caught up in family, or I'm traveling, or I've just recently had a week in Melbourne where my family were, and it was like, and I was there because I've got 3 daughters, and I only wanted to stay for a week because I've got some renovations happening here at home, and things, they just get a little bit hectic. And I wanted to give each of my daughters and grandchildren the time they deserved. And it was great. I had a wonderful week. But I just also knew that I just needed to, not fit in too many extra things and just go, well, right, I'm here for this week and that's what I'm focusing on. So being clear about, your time and how you spend your time and your energy is so important. And welcome to Walk with God. It was lovely to have you with us. And Jess Miller saying, I've been addressing triggers lately. It's time to really follow and clear them. Feels so good, much lighter. Absolutely. Some good advice there too.
And that fits right in with that transformation energy we were talking about, clearing those triggers, releasing them, not letting other people's stuff
Yes.
get you all too riled up in there. And okay, I think we forget sometimes. I know, I get busy writing. I have some very long days, especially right now, where I'm in this writing phase and I'm preparing to tour and things like that. And when we get into those spaces, I find that it's very important for me to take time, for example, at the end of the day, and just have some downtime where I'm not doing any intense thinking. I'm just letting my mind unwind. I'm just letting go of things. And that's important because that sleep is very important. And if we're not clearing our mind, it makes it very hard to sleep. A lot of these turmoils and these chaoses and things that are coming up, people can easily wake up with the anxiety attacks going on. And I think that these are the pieces where if you've got some of those oils near your bedstand, that you can kind of take that whiff in the middle of the night or something like that to have them ready, good to go. You mentioned frankincense and stuff earlier. Always one of my favorites is that, because of the way it aligns into the soul self, the way it purifies the mind, and a lot of the energies in there. When we look at our thoughts, because again, our mind can be very bombarded during that earlier part of April. In the second half of April, the 13th on through the end, again, this simplifying aspect becomes very important. And one of the things we want to ask or to consider when we're trying to make some decisions is, what is the soul's path? What is the soul's way of handling a situation? And rest into that, because it's almost makes it very easy to make a decision about something if we're asking what is aligned with the soul's path and what is not. And that one simple question can bring us into that mindset and help to keep us on track and not get too distracted.
Absolutely. And Jess Miller said, absolutely, the question, is this mine, is a good question to ask. There are lots of energies around that aren't our own. Emotions so loud, they seep into our aura. And that's a nice little segue for me to talk about white angelica, which is what I was thinking about while you were talking as well, which is an oil that it helps, protect you from being bombarded by other people's energies. And it's very important for us to know how to protect ourselves. And what I do with white angelica is I'll put it on, I'll smell it, and then I'll touch my shoulders and imagine that I'm becoming really strong and I have beautiful angel wings around me that will open up and permeate my aura, and I can bring that down and around me for protection when I feel I need protection, because we're so influenced by other people's thoughts, moods, energy, and we don't always know that we can be picking up on other people's influences.
Well, and it's always one of my favorite questions, actually. We're just brought that up. I'm glad she did, because I'm oftentimes asking that, and especially when we have the mind game things going on, when we have the bombardment of mental activity and things like that happening, always, and where people try to pull us into different mindsets or battles or things like that, really asking, is this my battle to be a part of? Is this my thing to deal with? And 99% of the negative thoughts that we receive are not our mindset. It's a program that's being pushed into our mind, that is trying to lead us down a path that is unfavorable for us, to get us feeling defeated, to get us feeling like we can't break through, to get us feeling like we don't have what it takes to move through something. And so, in my experiences, most of the time, if it's a negative thought pattern, it's not my own mind
Mm.
program. It's not my own thought.
That's right. And I think another good one that has worked for me is kind of knowing, well, I can't necessarily solve, I can't wave my magic wand and solve the problems of the world just like that. But what can I do is really more to the point, and just stick with what you can do. What's within your capability. And in having said that, I also think that the collective mindset is so important, and we've touched on that. As all of us start to come into alignment of the beauty and the wonder, the creativity, the wonderful life that we can have here on earth, the more of us that are resonating, we're going to be raising the vibration and frequency of all those around us.
Well, and one of the important things that comes in when we start to look at our emotions and our feelings during the month of April, is that we need to take some time to just have a little bit of fun. We need to do some things that are just more creative, more soulfully based, have fun interacting with other people. And this is another great way to break up a lot of that tension. So when we're in these tense periods, if we can do that, it will help keep us inspired. It will help to keep us motivated for what we need to do. And um, and it just allows that spirit energy to come out where we can take command of our own life more. And so sometimes, this may be singing in the shower. This may be dancing around the house while you're doing your cleaning. It can even be that simple, or it can be actually getting out someplace and being at an art show where you can get inspired by what other people are doing and the things that they're putting out in the world. And so we forget that sometimes on the spiritual path, people get too intense on it, and they forget that they just need to play a little bit with it. They just need to let themselves have a little bit of fun in the process of what they're doing. And that can also, again, help to keep us motivated, help to shift some of the energy and the dynamic that's in there. And that's going to be particularly important for the first week and a half of April, to do that. And I think that's good, because if we can honor that dynamic and that aspect, it's going to make it easier as the end of the month comes in and we have that really heavy transformation energy that we already talked about in there. If we've already taken the time to play and to lighten up a little bit, then it will make it easier to handle those intense pieces.
And you've already had a lovely effect on Gian. She's her comment here: synchronicity has occurred, Kay, and I shall have a day of serendipity. I received a call from someone in my past significant connection whom I'd been thinking of, who is visiting. We have arranged to meet at Sea Vibes Cafe Manly, where we met when you came to Queensland. So I shall catch the replay. So that's lovely, because I've met Gian online, and we when I was in Queensland, which is a different state in Australia to Tasmania, where I'm from, was up in Queensland, and we met up at a cafe, a lovely little cafe by the sea, and it was lovely. So and that was one of those, be creative in the moment. Where can we meet? What time? And it was fantastic. Jean said, so true. Those voices in our heads masquerade as our own thoughts. Good noticing. And Jess Miller, absolutely, 100%. I love to use pine, white angelica, frankincense, and a few more when I'm out. and replenish every half an hour if I'm in a crowded area, as frequencies of the oils get depleted with the vibrations of many. So it's always great to have your oils in your bag, not just I have them beside my bed, I have them in the kitchen, I have them all around me here, and I have them in the bathroom, so that no matter where I am, it's not too far to grab an oil. And really the oils just really help us to get back into synchronicity with who we truly are. And I think, it's just so good to have something on hand to help us consciously move energetically, particularly when we know we're not in a good place.
Well, and this is important because as we close out the month of April, emotionally, this can be a really tough time for a lot of people. What's coming up during that time is there's some heartbreak energy that can come up during that time. It's a time where people may lose things that they feel are very important to them, that are very connected, that they really care about during that time. And again, this can bring up some loss. It can bring up some aspects of grief going on. Some things, most of these things we're not going to have control over. So we don't want to get lost in that heavy emotion of blaming ourselves or things like that. But what we can do is we can be practical, we can be responsible with things. And in doing that, we will divert some of that. But what's so important is when we go through these periods that can be more painful, that can hit us right in here, is we want to make sure that we don't shut our heart down during that. And it's very easy to do when we're feeling pain, when we're feeling hurt about something. It's very easy just to close up. And this is a time where we need to make sure that we're holding the heart energy open. And that's not always easy, but I don't know, Kay, I'm sure that you've got something in there that helps people to hold on to keeping that heart energy open when they're dealing with grief and loss.
Yes. Rose oil. You can't go past rose oil for the heart. So beautiful rose oil. I've got it here on hand and I just love it. Or any of our blends that have rose oil in it. So joy comes to mind, and joy helps you to keep your heart, open, and helps you to energetically be open to receiving joy and creating joy, because joy is a beautiful state to come from. And when you do have the grief and loss and whatever is, and no matter whether it happens in April or when, we all have those times. Life is like a roller coaster. It goes up and down, and we've got to learn to ride that roller coaster so it doesn't take us quite so high up or so far down, so that it's more of a balance as we ride the waves. Think globally, act locally, and since things are beyond our control, we can think, not my circur, so not my. And I'm not sure what does that mean, circur. Anyway, and she's applied joy and valor for her meeting today, so perfect combination for taking yourself out in the world.
And if we can keep that open heart energy flowing in there. I love rose oil. It's one of my favorites in there, but it will help to hold us in alignment with the soul self. And that is really important when we're moving through the intense aspects and the intense components in there. And that really, really helps a lot with the transformation, because our human self can have challenges with some of the transformations and the intense periods. But if we come back into it from the soul's space, the soul's path, what the soul is looking at and seeing and viewing, that can help us to keep our heart open in there. And it's easier, even though it's not comfortable, it's always easier to hold the heart open than if you shut it down and then have to reopen it.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't think about that a lot of times, because what they think about is, in the moment, I'm feeling this pain and I don't want to feel this pain. So I'm going to shut everything down so I don't have to feel it as much. But then it's very hard to get that opened back up again once you start to really, depending on how intensely you've shut it down. And so, here again, that's part of the moving through things and not avoiding them in there.
Dealing with each and every moment as it comes. Now that brings us to a bit of a close here now. I was saying to you, how are we going to go for the hour? Are you feeling well enough? And I think you said you thought you'd manage, and it seems we have. We've had some beautiful people chatting with us. We love the interaction because it is about a conversation, and it is about us sharing with each other. So I really do appreciate all those people who are interacting on the live. If you watch the replay, #replay, come and find us on our many platforms. And Anne, have you got any final pieces of words or something you want to round it off with, or say your farewells?
Well, I think in April, again, people are kind of going in there a little bit worn down going into April, just because of what they've already been dealing with in March. But like anything, these influences do not last forever, and they might feel like they're a lot in the moment, but when you start to put in perspective, it's like a month is nothing. It's a blip. It's a blip in our lifetime. And it will be over before you know it. And I think that's one of the keys that in the hard times I've been through along the way is to always remind myself this isn't going to last forever.
It's just a phase we're going through.
It's just a phase, and we will have some easing up as we move towards May. And get into that month. But I just say, hang on there to people. Kay's given you a great amount of oils and things to work with to see your way through this, to maneuver it. Of course, if you haven't picked this book up, it's never too late to start, even though the year's already started. The Code Journey, which is what I work on. And again, every year I put out a new edition. I actually just reduced the price on the ebook version. So that can be a more cost-effective way for people that want to check it out, but it is a large book. But over on my website, compassioncodes.com, you'll see a tab that says goods. On the goods tab, you'll see the Code Journey, and the links there will get you directly to the pages for purchasing, if you want to purchase the paperback or the ebook version. And like I said, I just did a 25% reduction on the ebook version for people.
That I did notice that come through. And Jean said, I started last couple of weeks and it's made a difference. So Anne's making a difference in the lives of many. I have my book and I like to refer to that as well. So thank you, everyone, once again. And thanks, Anne, for giving us your beautiful time, and appreciate the fact that you're not feeling 100%, but you're here with us and doing what you do so well. So I would like to recommend that all of those people who are watching us, please make sure you shine your light in the world, do your inner work, and make sure your soul is what's speaking to your heart's actions. So from my heart to everybody's heart, thank you, and I look forward to whoever can join us next week in our uplifting conversation. Lots of love. Bye.